What would you do for a life of luxury? How far would you go to never worry about money again? Today's tale takes us to the rainy streets of Seoul, where ambition meets ancient evil, where a young man's greed leads him into the arms of something that has waited centuries for his arrival. This is a story of deception. But who is truly the deceiver? Of a hunter who doesn't realize he's the prey. Of a marriage built on lies that conceals something worse than death itself. Prepare yourself. Some stories should never be told. This is one of them. In the glass towers of Seoul's Gangnam district, where the elite of Korean society displayed their wealth like peacocks, Park Hyun-woo pressed his face against the window of an overpriced cafe. The rain streamed down the glass, distorting the world outside, a world he desperately wanted to be part of. At 32, Hyun-woo had grown tired of struggling. His small graphic design business barely kept him afloat in a city that worshipped success and scorned failure. Every morning, he would put on his only decent suit, slightly too tight at the shoulders, and pretend to be more successful than he was, meeting clients in hotel lobbies he could never afford to stay in. But today was different. Today, he had a plan. The woman sitting alone at the corner table didn't look like one of Korea's wealthiest heiresses. Song Min-ah wore a simple black dress, her long hair pulled back in an elegant but understated style. No designer logos, no flashy jewelry, just a single jade pendant at her throat that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. What the tabloids said about her was true. She was beautiful, but in a strange, almost otherworldly way. Her skin was porcelain pale, her eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the cafe's dim lighting. Hyun-woo had researched her thoroughly. 28 years old. Sole heir to the Song family fortune after her parents' mysterious disappearance during a yacht trip 3 years ago. Reclusive, unmarried, and in possession of a family fortune estimated at over $2 billion. I believe this seat is taken, Min-ah said softly as Hyun-woo approached. Her voice was melodic but cool, like water flowing over stone. Oh, I don't see anyone. Hyun-woo replied with his most charming smile, the one he had practiced countless times in the mirror. I meant by you, she said, her lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You're Park Hyun-woo, the graphic designer I commissioned for my charity foundation's new logo. Hyun-woo froze. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had created a fake email, invented a mutual acquaintance, engineered this chance meeting over weeks of planning. Yet here she was, recognizing him immediately. How did you... I make it my business to know who approaches me, she interrupted, gesturing to the chair across from her. Please sit. I've been watching you watch me for the past 20 minutes. I'm curious what you want. Hyun-woo swallowed hard, his carefully constructed plan crumbling. But he was nothing if not adaptable. I apologize for the deception, he said, settling into the chair. I wanted to meet you properly, not through emails and assistance. And why would you want that? Min-ah asked, lifting her teacup to her lips but not drinking. Because I believe we can help each other, Hyun-woo said, leaning forward. I've read about your charity work, your efforts to preserve traditional Korean culture. I have ideas that could take your foundation to the next level. Min-ah set down her untouched tea. You're lying again, she said, not unkindly. But I find your boldness refreshing. For a moment, her eyes seemed to shimmer with something ancient and hungry. Then she blinked, and it was gone. Tell me, Mr. Park, she continued, what do you really want from me? Over the next 3 months, Hyun-woo found himself drawn deeper into Min-ah's world. What had begun as a calculated scheme to seduce a wealthy heiress transformed into something he hadn't anticipated. He was fascinated by her. Their meetings always took place after sunset. Min-ah claimed a rare skin condition made daylight unbearable for her. When Hyun-woo researched the condition online, the results were inconclusive, but he didn't press the issue. Her nocturnal lifestyle was just one of her many eccentricities. Another was her diet. In all their dinners together, he never once saw her eat. She would order elaborately, pushing food around her plate, lifting forkfuls that never quite reached her mouth. When he asked about it, she smiled mysteriously. I follow a very specific regimen, she would say. My family's traditions are particular, By the second month, Hyun-woo's initial greed had become complicated by genuine attraction. Min-ah was unlike any woman he had ever met. Her knowledge of history was encyclopedic, especially regarding Korea's ancient dynasties. Sometimes she would speak of historical events as if she had witnessed them herself. The palace fire of 1624 wasn't an accident, she once said, staring into her wine glass. The queen consort ordered it to cover up the disappearance of 7 court ladies. I didn't know that was an historical record, Hyun-woo commented. Min-ah's smile was enigmatic. Not everything is written in books, Hyun-woo. It was during their 12th meeting that she first invited him to her family estate, a sprawling traditional hanok complex hidden within the mountains outside Seoul. The property was immense, surrounded by ancient pine trees that blocked out the city lights. The main house was a perfect blend of traditional architecture and modern luxury. But what struck Hyun-woo most was the silence. Despite the size of the estate, there seemed to be no staff present. No gardeners, no housekeepers, no security. I value my privacy, Min-ah explained when he asked. The staff comes only during the day when I rest. She led him through a series of courtyards to a pavilion overlooking a pond. The moon reflected perfectly on the still water. My family has lived here for 17 generations, she said. This land remembers us. As if on cue, a cool breeze rustled through the pine trees, carried with a faint scent of something metallic, like old copper. It's beautiful, Hyun-woo said, meaning it. His original plan suddenly seemed crass and small compared to the mystery before him. Min-ah turned to him, her pale face luminous in the moonlight. Will you stay the night? Hyun-woo's heart raced. This was what he had been working toward, wasn't it? Yet something in her eyes made him hesitate, a hunger that went beyond physical desire. Yes, he said, ignoring his instincts. I'd like that. That night, in her canopied bed that smelled of sandalwood and something else he couldn't identify, Hyun-woo discovered that Min-ah's skin was cool to the touch, as if she'd just come in from a winter's night. When he kissed her, her lips tasted faintly of iron. In the throes of passion, he thought he saw her eyes change, becoming entirely black for a split second. But in the dim light, he convinced himself it was a trick of the shadows. As he drifted off to sleep beside her, he didn't notice that she remained awake, watching him with ancient eyes, her finger tracing patterns on his chest directly above his heart. The proposal wasn't part of Hyun-woo's original plan, at least not so soon. He had intended a longer seduction, perhaps a year or more, before suggesting marriage. But something about Min-ah made him impatient, almost desperate to bind her to him. 3 months into their relationship, on a moonlit night in her family's ancestral garden, he knelt before her. I know this is sudden, he said, producing a ring he had purchased with the last of his savings. But I've never felt this way about anyone. Min-ah, will you marry me? For a long moment, she was silent, her face unreadable. Then she smiled, revealing teeth that seemed just slightly too sharp at the edges. Yes, she said, I will join my life with yours. The way she phrased it struck him as odd, but he was too elated to dwell on it. As she slipped the ring onto her finger, Hyun-woo felt a sudden chill pass through him, like a premonition. He dismissed it as nervous excitement. What he didn't see was a satisfied look Min-ah exchanged with the ancient pine tree behind him, its branches seeming to bend toward her in acknowledgement. The wedding was arranged with surprising speed. Min-ah insisted on a traditional ceremony at her family estate, with only a handful of guests, mostly business associates Hyun-woo had never met before. He had invited his parents and sister, but Min-ah had persuaded him that a small ceremony would be more intimate. My family has always married in private, she explained. It's tradition. The ceremony took place at midnight, another tradition she insisted upon. Under the full moon, they exchanged vows in front of a shaman whose face was partially concealed by an antique mask. Instead of the usual wedding rituals, Min-ah had arranged something different. A ceremonial knife was brought forth on a cushion of red silk. The shaman instructed them each to make a small cut on their palms and press them together. Blood of blood, life of life, the shaman intoned. What is separate becomes one. As their blood mingled, Hyun-woo felt dizzy, almost euphoric. Min-ah's eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight, her grip surprisingly strong as she held his bleeding hand. Later, he would barely remember the rest of the ceremony, only fragments, the taste of bitter wine, words spoken in an archaic dialect he couldn't understand, and the strange sensation that the guests were watching him not with joy but with something like pity. That night, as her husband, he slept in Minna's chambers for the first time. The massive bed was centered beneath a painting so old its images had faded to shadows. Minna made love to him with an intensity that bordered on violence, leaving marks on his skin that would take days to fade. As he drifted into exhausted sleep, he thought he heard her whisper something against his neck. "Now you are mine," as it was foretold. Marriage to Minna brought the wealth and luxury Hyunwoo had dreamed of. Overnight, he went from struggling designer to husband of one of Korea's wealthiest women. Minna added his name to her accounts, bought him designer clothes, and presented him with a sleek sports car as a wedding gift. Yet as the weeks passed, certain oddities became impossible to ignore. First, there was Minna's locked room. In the east wing of the main house stood a door of ancient wood, reinforced with iron bands. Despite having access to every other part of the estate, this room remained forbidden to him. Family archives, Minna explained dismissively when he asked. Nothing of interest to anyone but me. Second, the staff continued to be conspicuously absent whenever he was around. He would hear them in distant parts of the house during the day, but if he approached, they would vanish like ghosts. Once, he caught a glimpse of an elderly housekeeper who, upon seeing him, dropped her gaze and hurried away, making a gesture across her chest that looked suspiciously like warding off evil. Third, and most disturbing, was Minna's health. She never ate in his presence, explaining that she had already dined or would eat later. She slept oddly little, often slipping out of bed in the middle of the night. When questioned, she claimed insomnia, but her energy never seemed depleted. 1 month into their marriage, Hyunwoo awoke at 3 a.m. to find himself alone in bed. Concerned, he went looking for Minna. The house was silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock in the hallway. As he approached the eastern wing, he heard voices. Minna's and another older woman's, speaking in a dialect so ancient he could barely recognize it as Korean. He pressed his ear against the door of the forbidden room. Must be completed by the solstice. The older voice was saying, "The signs are aligned." "I know my responsibilities," Minna replied. 17 generations had prepared for this moment. The others failed because they grew attached. The older voice warned, "Remember what happened to your mother." "I am not my mother," Minna said coldly. "I know what must be done." Hyunwoo backed away quietly, his heart pounding. What responsibilities? What had happened to Minna's mother? And hadn't Minna told him both her parents died in a boating accident? The next day, he began his investigation. While Minna was occupied with business calls, he slipped into her study and accessed her computer. Her password, the day of their first meeting, was embarrassingly easy to guess. Her browser history revealed research into ancient Korean shamanism, lunar cycles, and blood rituals. One bookmarked page detailed the ceremony of eternal binding, a ritual supposedly performed by the Goryeo dynasty's royal shamans to ensure immortality. Disturbed but not yet alarmed, Hyunwoo decided to look deeper into Minna's family history. He contacted a university friend who worked as a historical researcher. The Song family, his friend said over the phone. They're one of the oldest documented bloodlines in Korea. There's an interesting legend about them, actually. Something about a pact with a mountain spirit in exchange for eternal life. Of course, it's just a folktale. Of course, Hyunwoo agreed, though a chill ran down his spine. That evening, during one of their rare dinner gatherings with Minna's business associates, Hyunwoo noticed something odd. While introducing him, one elderly man referred to him as the 17th vessel. When Hyunwoo questioned it later, Minna laughed it off. "He's senile," she said. "Pays too much attention to old superstitions." But the term nagged at him. That night, he waited until Minna left their bedroom on one of her mysterious nighttime excursions. Then he did what he'd been afraid to do until now. He went to investigate the locked room. He had secretly made an impression of Minna's key ring in modeling clay and had a copy made. With trembling hands, he unlocked the ancient door. The room beyond was not what he expected. instead of dusty archives. He found a space that looked like a shrine. In the center stood a pedestal holding a jade box identical to the pendant Minna always wore. The walls were covered with paintings, 17 portraits of men from different historical periods, each bearing a striking red mark over their heart. With mounting horror, he realized the most recent portrait was of him. On an altar beneath the portraits sat an ancient book bound in dark leather. When he opened it, the pages were covered in script so old he could barely recognize the characters. But scattered throughout were diagrams of human anatomy, focusing on the heart, and what appeared to be ritual instructions. One page bore a modern bookmark. The text described the great rite of completion to be performed when the 17th vessel has been prepared through marriage and blood binding. The ritual called for the removal of the vessel's heart during the summer solstice, while still beating, to be consumed by the keeper of the pact, ensuring another century of life. Hyun-woo stumbled back, the book falling from his hands. The summer solstice was 3 days away. As if summoned by his discovery, the door creaked open. Minna stood in the doorway, her face expressionless. "You shouldn't be in here," she said softly. "Not yet." "What is this?" Hyun-woo demanded, gesturing at the portraits. "What am I to you?" Minna sighed, entering the room with fluid grace. She no longer seemed to be hiding her true nature. Her movements were too perfect, too controlled to be human. "You are my husband," she said simply. "My chosen one. The 17th and final vessel." "Final vessel for what?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Minna touched the jade pendant at her throat, identical to the box on the pedestal. "In 1392, during the fall of Goryeo, my ancestor made a pact with an entity older than Korea itself. In exchange for immortality and power, she promised a sacrifice, a pure heart freely given through love, once every decade." She gestured at the portraits. 16 men throughout the centuries, each believing they married for fortune or status or beauty. Each one's heart consumed at the moment of greatest love. Hyun-woo backed away, bumping into the altar. "You're insane." "No," Minna said with a sad smile. "I am the last of my line. The completion of the pact requires a 17th heart, freely given. Then the cycle ends, and I become truly immortal, not dependent on periodic sacrifice. You expect me to believe you're hundreds of years old?" Hyun-woo scoffed, though his voice shook. Minna's eyes suddenly changed, the whites disappearing as they turned completely black. "I was born in 1378, she said, her voice layering with something older and deeper. "I have worn many names, but always kept my true nature hidden. Until now." She stepped closer. "I chose you carefully, Hyun-woo. Your ambition, your willingness to use others for gain. You were perfect. A heart tainted enough to be attracted to darkness, yet pure enough in its capacity for love to satisfy the ritual. And if I refuse to be your sacrifice," he challenged. Her laugh was gentle, almost pitying. "The blood binding at our wedding ensures you cannot leave the estate without my permission. Besides," she added, "you're already falling in love with me, despite your initial mercenary intentions. I can feel it." The worst part was that she was right. Despite his fear, despite what he now knew, some part of him still desired her, still wanted her approval. "What happens to me after the ritual?" he asked, his mouth dry. Minna's expression softened. "Your consciousness joins the others," she said, gesturing to the portraits. "A part of you will live within me forever. It is an honor few mortals receive. And if I run?" "You won't," she said with certainty. "Part of you wants this ending. The part that has always known you were meant for something extraordinary." As if to prove her point, she reached out to touch his cheek. Despite his fear, he couldn't pull away. Her touch sent waves of pleasure through him, an addiction he hadn't recognized until this moment. "Rest now," she whispered. "In 3 days at the solstice, you'll fulfill your destiny." That night, locked in their bedroom, Hyun-woo lay awake beside Minna, watching her in the moonlight. She appeared to be sleeping, though he now questioned whether she slept at all. Her chest barely moved with breath. He thought about her revelation, about the 16 men before him. Had they known their fate? Had they accepted it? Or had they, like him, sought escape? As dawn approached, he made his decision. Whatever supernatural power bound him to the estate, whatever hold Minna had over him, he would not willingly sacrifice himself for her immortality. When she left the room at sunrise to retreat to her daily resting place, he would find a way out. The sunrise painted the mountains gold as Hyunwoo crept through the garden. As expected, Minna had retreated to her private chambers for her daily rest. What he now suspected might be a vampiric necessity rather than a medical condition. He had packed nothing, knowing speed was essential. The blood binding supposedly prevented him from leaving the estate without Minna's permission, but he had to try. The main gate was locked, as always. As he approached it, a strange heaviness filled his limbs, making each step more difficult than the last. By the time he reached the gate, he was crawling, his body rebelling against his mind's commands. "Going somewhere?" came a voice behind him. Not Minna's, but the elderly woman he had heard through the door. He managed to turn his head to see a wizened figure in traditional hanbok. Her face creased with age, but her eyes as black and depthless as Minna's had been in the shrine room. Who are you?" he gasped, still fighting against an invisible force pinning him down. "I am the keeper before her," the woman said. Minna's mother, but she said her parents died. "A necessary fiction," the woman interrupted. "I gave up my corporeal form to become her guardian until the final ritual is complete. After the solstice, I will finally rest, and she will take my place as a true keeper." The old woman knelt beside him, studying his face with clinical detachment. "There have been those who tried to escape before you. The fourth vessel made it as far as the village before his heart burst in his chest. The ninth threw himself from the eastern cliff rather than fulfill his destiny." She shook her head. "Such waste." "Please," Hyunwoo begged. "Let me go. I don't want to die." The old woman's laugh was like dry leaves rustling. "Die? Is that what you think happens? Oh, child, death would be a mercy compared to what awaits you." With surprising strength, she hauled him to his feet. "Come, if you cannot be trusted to await the solstice peacefully, there are other accommodations." She led him, his body moving against his will, to a small stone building set apart from the main house. Inside was a single room with an altar similar to the one in the shrine, but smaller. The walls were carved with symbols he didn't recognize. "This is where the unwilling wait," she explained, forcing him to kneel before the altar. "By midnight, you will beg the honor of giving your heart to my daughter." From her sleeve, she produced a small jade knife. Before he could react, she sliced his palm, the same one that had been cut during the wedding ceremony, and pressed his bleeding hand against a stone basin on the altar. "Blood calls to blood," she intoned. Heart yearned for heart. As his blood touched the stone, an excruciating pain shot through Hyunwoo's chest. He collapsed, clutching at his heart, which felt as if it were trying to tear itself from his rib cage. "The binding works two ways," the old woman explained conversationally as he writhed in agony. "The farther you are from Minna, the greater your pain. By sunset, you will crawl to her on your hands and knees, begging to give her your heart." She closed the heavy door behind her, leaving him alone with his pain and desperation. Hours passed. True to the old woman's prediction, the pain intensified as the sun climbed higher. Hyunwoo's thoughts became fragmented, focused only on Minna. His anger and fear began to transform into longing. He found himself remembering her touch, her voice, the coolness of her skin against his. By sunset, he was hallucinating, seeing Minna in the shadows of the small room, hearing her call his name. The pain in his chest had become unbearable. He clawed at the door, willing to do anything to be near her again. When the door finally opened, revealing Minna in a traditional red hanbok, Hyunwoo sobbed with relief. "My love," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Why did you try to leave me? Don't you understand how special you are?" "Please," he gasped, "make it stop." She stroked his hair tenderly. "The pain will end tomorrow night, when the ritual is complete. Until then, you must be strong." With gentle hands, she helped him to his feet and led him back to the main house. The pain receded slightly in her presence, but never fully disappeared. It was a constant reminder of their unnatural bond. That night, she bathed him herself, washing away the sweat and tears with cool water scented with herbs. Despite everything, her touch still ignited desire in him, a craving that disgusted and thrilled him in equal measure. "Is any of it real?" he asked as she dressed him in a white silk robe. "What you feel for me." Minna's eyes, human now, not the depthless black, held what appeared to be genuine sadness. "In 17 lifetimes, you're the only one I've told the truth to before the end. That must count for something." It wasn't an answer, but Hyun-woo was beyond caring. The pain and the supernatural bond had worn away his resistance. A strange calm settled over him as he realized there would be no escape. "Will it hurt?" he asked. "The ritual?" Minna kissed him softly. "Only for a moment. Then you'll be part of something eternal." The night of the summer solstice arrived clear and moonlit. Hyun-woo was led to the central courtyard, where stone lanterns illuminated a ceremonial space. In the center stood a raised platform of black marble, ancient and worn smooth by centuries of use. Minna's mother and several black-robed figures, the staff he had barely glimpsed during his time at the estate, surrounded the platform. They were chanting in that same ancient dialect, their voices rising and falling like waves. Minna appeared, no longer hiding her otherworldly nature. She wore a ceremonial robe of deepest red, her hair unbound to her waist. Around her neck, the jade pendant glowed with an inner light. "It is time," she said, extending her hand to him. "Come, my love, fulfill your destiny." Hyun-woo, dressed in white silk, took her hand. The pain in his chest had transformed into a strange euphoria. Part of him, the rational part that had planned to seduce a wealthy woman for a fortune, screamed in protest, but that voice was growing fainter by the second. Minna led him to the marble platform and helped him lie down. The stone was surprisingly warm against his back, as if it absorbed the heat of 16 sacrifices before him. "For centuries, my family has preserved our line through the ancient pact." Minna addressed the gathered figures. "Tonight, with the 17th and final vessel, I complete what my ancestor began in 1392. The cycle ends and true immortality begins." Her mother stepped forward, carrying the jade box from the shrine room. When opened, it revealed a curved knife with a handle of the same jade as Minna's pendant. "Through 17 generations, through war and peace, through the rise and fall of dynasties, we have kept our blood pure for this moment," the old woman intoned. "With this final heart, freely given in love, the pact is sealed for eternity." She handed the knife to Minna, who stood over Hyun-woo with ceremonial solemnity. Heart to heart, blood to blood. Minna chanted, the gathered figures echoing her words. Life eternal, death transcended. She untied Hyun-woo's robe, bearing his chest in moonlight. With one finger, she traced a pattern over his heart, the same symbol he had seen in the ancient book. "In your sacrifice, there is power," she whispered to him. "In your love, there is eternity." Hyun-woo looked up at her, this inhuman creature he had sought to use, who was now using him in a far more profound way. Yet even now, knowing his fate, he couldn't hate her. The blood binding, the supernatural connection between them, had transformed his mercenary attraction into something deeper, something that transcended his fear of death. "I'm ready," he said, surprising himself with his calmness. Minna smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face into something truly beautiful. For a moment, he glimpsed what she must have looked like when still fully human. Centuries ago, a young woman burdened with an ancient legacy. She raised a jade knife high, its edge catching the moonlight. The chanting reached a crescendo. "With this sacred blade, I take what is freely given," she proclaimed. "With this final sacrifice, I complete the pact of 17 generations." The knife descended toward his chest. Hyun-woo closed his eyes, awaiting the pain. But instead of the expected thrust, he heard a clatter as the knife fell to the stone beside him. He opened his eyes to see Minna standing frozen, her expression contorted with something that looked remarkably like human doubt. "I can't," she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. "Not you." Her mother surged forward, black eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing? Complete the ritual. The moment is upon us." Minna stepped back on the platform, shaking her head. No, this ends now. Not with another sacrifice. A murmur ran through the gathered figures. Minna's mother grasped her daughter's arm with claw-like fingers. 17 generations have lived and died for this moment, she hissed. Your ancestors paid in blood and sorrow for the power you now hold. You would throw it away? For him. Minna looked at Hyunwoo, still lying on the platform, confusion replacing his earlier acceptance. Yes, she said simply. For him, and for myself. I choose to remain as I am rather than become something that has forgotten how to love. Foolish child, her mother shrieked, her human form beginning to distort, elongating into something ancient and terrible. If you will not complete the ritual, then I shall. She lunged with a fallen knife, but Minna was faster. She snatched up the blade, and in one swift motion, plunged it into her own chest. No! Both Hyunwoo and the mother screamed in unison. Blood, impossibly dark and ancient, flowed from Minna's wound. But instead of falling, she remained standing, her eyes fixed on her mother. Blood of my blood, Minna said, her voice gaining an otherworldly resonance. I return what was given. I break what was made. I end what should never have begun. The jade pendant at her throat shattered, fragments scattering across the marble platform. A terrible wailing filled the air as Minna's mother's form collapsed in on itself, dissolving into shadow and mist. The other robed figures began to fade like morning fog, their wails echoing across the courtyard. The very ground beneath them trembled as if the state itself was coming apart. Minna collapsed beside Hyunwoo on the platform. He gathered her into his arms, heedless of the blood staining his white robe. Why? He asked, cradling her face. Why give up immortality? Minna's smile was weak but genuine. Because in 17 lifetimes, you were the only one who made me remember what it was to be human. The only one I couldn't bear to sacrifice. Around them, the estate was disintegrating, the ancient magic sustaining it unraveling with the broken pact. Stone cracked, was splintered, and the carefully tended gardens withered before their eyes. We need to leave, Hyunwoo said urgently. Can you walk? Minna touched her wound, which had already begun to close. The immortality remains for now. The pact is broken, but its effect will fade slowly. She looked around at the crumbling estate. But everything my family built on blood and sacrifice will soon be gone. Supporting each other, they made their way through the collapsing buildings and dying gardens. The blood binding that had prevented Hyunwoo's escape was gone, shattered with Minna's pendant. As they passed through the main gate, Minna turned for one last look at her ancestral home. Centuries of history, of power built on sacrifice, reduced to ruins in minutes. What happens now? Hyunwoo asked as they made their way down the mountain path. Minna looked at her hands, already appearing more human, the otherworldly pallor giving way to natural warmth. I age. I live. Eventually I die, like everyone else. We age, Hyunwoo corrected, taking her hand. We live. Together. Minna's smile held centuries of sorrow, but also newfound hope. Yes, together, for however long we have. By the time they reached the city, dawn was breaking over Seoul. The glass towers reflected the rising sun, no longer symbols of wealth Hyunwoo coveted, but simply buildings where people lived ordinary, mortal lives. The kind of life that now stretched before them.